Making of a global world. What does we mean? What do we mean when we say the making of global world? See, this is our earth, a globe. And when we say that this globe, we have several countries, and then we say world, globe with all the countries, it is global worlds, and how they are interlinked together with respect to their culture, with respect to their trade, with respect to their movement, means the people movement and the things movement. So this is how the global world is formed. We'll start with the pre-modern world. So in order to understand the making of a global world, we have to understand the history of trade, migration, and people search for work and the movement of capitals. So this is pre-modern world. Let me just tell you about this, that human societies have steadily more interlinked. In different societies, it can be of any world. So they are quite interlinked means. Globalization means coming together of all the countries, most of the countries, you can say not all, most of the countries together so that they are seen, they talk, they move together. So human societies have steadily more interlinked. The travelers, traders, priests, and pilgrims, they traveled vast distance for carrying goods or money, ideas, skills, inventions, and even germs and disease. The Indus Valley civilization was linked with West Asia, and then we'll talk about cowries. Cowries, a form of currency from Maldives. So this is what I was telling about, that this global world is a process which has formed due to trade, migration of people in search of work, because when people go, this is a labor, or people have mind, they have culture, they have thought, movement of capital, that is the money, and various things. So that is how things got together. As I said, societies have become steadily more interlinked now. That is, the travelers, we have seen in the ancient times, travelers, traders, priests, pilgrims, they are all traveled vast distances for search of knowledge, opportunity, spirituality fulfillment, or even if their land is not good or there is fighting, they can escape the persecution or any other thing. So they just not move. They moved to carry good, to carry money. They had values, skills, ideas, inventions, and even germs and diseases. So this is how the Indus Valley civilization with present-day West Asia, it's coastally linked. And there is a word, Hindi, kaudi, that is seashells. And this was the form of currency, cowries, and it was from Maldives. And this currency was even in China and East Africa, it was applicable there. So even the germs people carried. So here is a picture which is showing the image of a ship on a memorial stone, Goa Museum. So this shows that how important was people going from one place to another using these kind of transportation or surface transport ships. Then silk routes link the world. So there is not only one silk route, there were numerous silk routes. So let me give you an idea of this first of all, that the silk routes were regarded as the most important route linking the distant part of the world. The routes were existed even before the Christian era and flourished till the 15th century. The Buddhist preachers, Christian missionaries, and then later the Muslim preacher, they used to travel by these routes. So these routes proved to be great source of trade and cultural, you can say, links between distinct parts of the world. So here is a picture of one of the Silk Route of Guangzhou, China. So as I said, Silk Routes. These routes were very important because these routes paved the path for different type of things to go here and there. Okay, that is the people, the Chinese pottery, the textiles, the spices from India and South Asia. So, and in return, what they get? They get gold and silver from where? From Europe to Asia. So Asia is sending textile spices. It is getting gold and silver. And also trade and cultural exchange, very important. If you see, the religion also spread using these routes, because Christian missionaries, Muslim preachers, they all might have took these routes. So this is how these routes interlink people, Asia, Europe, etc. We'll take an example of food travels, spaghetti and potato. So let me give you a brief idea, then we'll discuss in detail. So this is a picture of merchants from Venice and the Orient exchanging goods. So these people are, you can say in summary, they are exchanging goods from Marco Polo. So conquest, food travels, and then disease and trade all happened. So let me tell you what happened here. Food also traveled from one part to another. If you take an example of spaghetti, now this spaghetti was noodles. So noodles, it traveled from China, and when it came to the Western world, it became spaghetti. This noodles also only was called as spaghetti. I'll give you one more example. Arab traders, they took pasta to Sicily, and Sicily is what? Today's Italy. So Arab traders, this pasta, which is this is very famous in Sicily, that is Italy. It was not there until Arab traders bought this pasta. Okay, so this is how things move from one place to another. If you talk about our country, foods like potatoes, soya, groundnuts, maize, tomatoes, chilies, sweet potatoes, they were not known. They were not known to us about 5 centuries ago. They only came after that. And these foods, it came to, or they were only introduced in Europe and Asia after one guy accidentally discovered the vast continent that would later become known as the Americas. So he was Christopher Columbus. He accidentally discovered Americas, and all these, the name I took, potatoes, soya, groundnuts, maize, tomato, chili, sweet potatoes, they all came from the Americas. So this is not America, okay? It's Americas. It has various, I'll just tell you what Americas means. So America here means North America plus South America and the Caribbean. So when you combine them, North America, South America and Caribbean, then we call them as America. And those who lived there were called American Indians. All these food have come from there. So sometimes these foods were so important that even if this food was not available, people died. If you see, this is an Irish potato famine. This is 10 lakh people. 10 lakh people died in this famine, potato famine, because they were not getting potato. They were so used to this potato that when the potato was not growing, or it was famine there, from 1845 to 1849, this many people died. So this is how food also made a lot of difference. This disease destroyed. There was a disease that is why the potato crop actually was destroyed in mid 1840s, and these all died because of starvation, not getting enough food. So conquest, disease, and trade. Let me tell you some summary here, then we'll go to the detail. First is that in 16th century, after European sailors found a sea route to Asia and America, they found the sea routes. The Indian subcontinent had been known for bustling trade with goods, people, custom, and knowledge. So it was a crucial point in their trade network. And after the discovery of America, its vast lands, abundant crops, a lot of crops were there, minerals began to transform trade and lives of everywhere. Precious metals, particularly silver from mines which are located in Peru and Mexico, it enhanced the wealth of what? Europe, and financed its trade with Asia. The Portuguese and the Spanish conquest and colonization of America was underway. The most powerful weapon of the Spanish conquerors was not military weapon. It was not conventional military weapon, but germs of smallpox germs which they carried. America's original inhabitants had no immunity against such type of diseases, so they died. This is called biological warfare. So let me go to the detail of this, and then we'll discuss this one by one. As I said, that in 16th century, European sailors found sea route to Asia and then to America. So this Indian Ocean, as we know, were known for its trade, goods, people, customs, knowledge, and they were crisscrossing in water. And this Indian subcontinent were very crucial because it was in the network. Before its discovery, that is America, when it was not discovered, it was cut off from the world. It was cut off from the world. But the abundant crops, the lot of crops it can produce, the minerals it has, it changed everything. As I said, precious metals, particularly silver, from mines located in present-day Peru and Mexico. This metal enhanced or emancipated Europe's wealth and financed its trade with Asia. And then, if there is a question, it is asked that legend spread in 17th century Europe about, or there was a story, you can say, South America fabled wealth, and this is El Dorado. Many expeditions set off in search of El Dorado. So El Dorado is the fabled city of gold, El Dorado. Now, as we just saw, that the Portuguese and the Spanish, they conquest and they conquered, you can say colonized the America, but they didn't do it using their firepower. They don't need it because they took smallpox, a disease, with them. So it was kind of a biological warfare. Why? Because these Europeans, they have immunity for this smallpox disease, but the inhabitants, that is the American Indians, you can say, they were not immune to this smallpox. So this smallpox killed almost everyone. And it spread to those places where these Europeans didn't go. They don't go, but still smallpox, because it is a communicable disease, it went like fire. And these colonizers, Portuguese, Spanish, etc., they don't have to fight because people were dying by themselves because of smallpox. So as I said, it was not required. People were dying by themselves. So there were, stories, or you can say there were incidents. Why people went or they fled to America? Because the European place, it was those cities were having diseases. In Europe, there were always religious conflicts, and if you dissent against the religion, you are persecuted, killed. That is why most of the people, they find America a better place. And also, the African people who were captured as a slave, they were sent to America for what? For growing cotton, for growing sugar, for the European markets. See, until well into the 18th century, there were two countries, they were very rich, world's richest country. And who else than China and India? They were China and India. But China from the 15th century, it was very happy to live in isolation. That is, China restricted overseas contacts and it retreated into isolation, that it doesn't want to trade or talk or have any relationship with the world. That is why China went down and down. As I said, China was the richest country. And because China didn't took any interest, America became the center of world trade. And then Europe emerged again because America was rising. The importance of America was rising. China's role was reducing. So this was the center of world trade westwards. That is, Europeans were doing it. So Europeans or Europe now emerged as the center of world trade. If you see, this is a picture of slaves. All these are slaves and they are well dressed. They are bought well dressed. There are two kids also, women, so that they can be bought. The 19th century from 1815 to 1914. So first, let me tell you about the world economy takes shape, then I'll go into the detail. So here, there was abolition of corn law in United Kingdom. Under pressure from the landowner groups, the government restricted the import of food grains. After the corn laws were scrapped, food could be imported in Britain more cheaply than it could be produced in the country. So British farmers were unable to compete with imports. Vast areas of land were left uncultivated. So as the food prices fell, consumption in Britain rose. Faster industrial growth in Britain led to higher incomes and more food imports. So what I just talked about, let me take you to the detail. As I said, in 19th century, world was changing economically, politically, socially, culturally, and technologically also. So there were three types of movements or flow. So economists, they have identified that in this international exchanges, economic exchanges, money exchanges, there are three things which were flowing or moving. The first was the goods, that is cloth or wheat. The second was labor, that is people were migrating for employment, in search of employment. And the third was the movement of capital for short-term and long-term investment over long distances. Let me just tell you again. So the economists, they have identified three types of movement, flows you can say. The first is the trade, that is trade in goods, cloth and wheat. The second is the labor migration for employment. And the third is the movement of capital for short-term and long-term investment over the long distances. So these three flows were closely interwoven and they affected the lives of the people. For example, if you see that labor migration, because here human beings were involved, it has all the restrictions over it. But when the good flows or something go from one place to another, the restrictions were not that much. So as I said, the world economy take shape. So what happened here in Britain, let us talk about, because the food production, the pattern was changing, the consumption was changing. Countries like Britain, self-sufficient in food, but there was the social conflict was there, the living standard conflict was there. How? In UK, England, Britain, population growth has increased. Because the population has increased in 18th century, there was a demand of food grains. But because there was a pressure on the government that they should not bring the food material, that is corn, from outside. That is, they should not import. Why? Because there were pressure from the landed groups, people who own land, who were producing food, or you can say corn. So import of corn was restricted, and this was known as corn laws. Please understand what is corn laws. The corn law means the import of the food materials, especially corn, was restricted. But because people, the demand of food was increasing and people were not happy, this corn laws were finally abolished. After this corn law was scrapped or abolished, now the food can be imported to Britain. But it was cheap. So British agriculture or British agriculturists, they were not able to compete with these imports, which are less in price. So large areas were left uncultivated. People were out of work, they got unemployed, and they just ran or migrated to other countries, other places. So this is how the world economy takes shape, just because of these things. I just talked about migration. See, this is the immigrant ship leaving for US, full of immigrants, and here this is of Ireland. Irish immigrants waiting to board the ship. So as things were going on in Britain, as food prices fell, consumption also gone up high. From the mid-19th century, faster industrial growth in Britain also led to people having higher income. So therefore, there were more imports of food. That is, in the world, Eastern Europe, Russia, America, Australia, in these places, people were producing food for whom? To feed Britain, to feed British. So it is not, only the clearing of land. When you want to send something, or if you are creating agriculture product, you have to send them. So railways was needed, ship was needed, cargoes were needed. You need to have more docks. That means there were a lot of buildings and settlements. Labor and capital is required. So capital came from where? From London. So as the demand for labor in places, because this country is not very, very large, people are less. So how to get the labor? The labor came from America. Australia, means these labor, short supply was there. So demand for labor in places where labor was in short supply in America and Australia, it led to more migration. So nearly 50 million people, as I said here, you can see the picture also, 50 million people migrated or emigrated from Europe to America. All over the world, 150 million, they left their home, they crossed the oceans and just try to find a land for their better future. Now, by the 1890, again, there were exchanges, complex exchanges. As I said, labor movement was there, capital was flowing, that money was going here and there, the technology transfer was there, the ecologies were changing of the environment, the people, and the business. That is, now food is not coming from your backyard. It is coming from miles away, very far away, right? So railway was used, ship was used, and because labor is needed, and that is, labor should be lower paid. So people from Southern Europe, Asia, Africa, and Caribbean were taken, right? They were taken as the low paid worker. If you take an example of India, in Punjab, West Punjab, this is a semi-desert place. So British government did what? They created canals for irrigation. Very good network of canals, that is, water can flow for irrigation, so that they can grow wheat and cotton. And this wheat and cotton was grown just for export, sending it to other countries. So these canal colonies, that is the part of Punjab where these peasants got settled, they were known as canal colonies. So food is just an example. Right? Cultivation of which expanded worldwide to feed British textile mills also. That is not only food, but people or countries were growing cotton. Why? Because British textile mills needed them. Rubber also. So this, not only food, other things were also being produced so that they can be exported for a country or a place where it is required. So if you see, from 1820 to 1914, world trade estimated to have multiplied 25 to 40 times. This is how trade was going on. And 60% of the trade was comprised of what? Primary products, that is agriculture products like wheat, cotton, minerals like coal. So what was the role of the technology? The role of technology, let me give you some idea first. Technology has a great impact on the transformation of 19th century world, such as railways, steamship and telegraph. Technological advances were often the result of social, political and economic factors. The refrigerated ships greatly helped to transport the perishable food like the meat, etc., over a long distance. So it greatly facilitated the shipment of frozen meat from America, Australia or New Zealand to different European countries. So how this technology helped? The railways, the steamships, the telegraph, all were inventions that transformed the trade and globalization of the world. Okay, let me tell you, this faster railways, lighter wagons and large ships were made just to make these markets and the trade to happen, you can say fast. If you see 20 to 40 times it increased, that is, there was a role of technology for faster railways, making lighter wagons and larger ships. I'll give an example of meat. Here is a picture of a cattle show. Cattle are showed and people buy it. Here is meat uploaded or loaded on the ship. So the trade of meat is a very good example to show how these technology helped, and all these are connected process. Till the 1870s, animals were shipped live, the livestock, from America to Europe. When it comes to Europe, then they are slaughtered. But animals, they are just animals. They died in voyage. They fell ill. They lose weight. They become unfit to eat. So only it was a luxury. People who are eating in Europe, it's luxury for them. So poor people cannot buy meat. Then came the refrigeration. So this is a technology. How this technology helped? Refrigerated ship with refrigeration, that is cold environment. So now the meat is now sent over long distances. All the perishable foods like eggs, like the dairy products, it can be sent. So this first the meat or the animals are slaughtered in America, Australia and New Zealand. Then they are transported to Europe as a frozen meat. Now the normal people who were eating bread and potatoes, now they can add the meat also in their meal, like butter and eggs, etc. So meat, butter and eggs, these are now can be afforded by the people. We were discussing about the late 19th century colonialism, but before that we discussed about the technology in the trade, in making the society global, or the trade go global or economic society. We have seen about how people were migrating, and then the perishable items now can be transferred to longer distances because refrigeration, that is the technology of cooling things or refrigerating the ships, and this can be sent from one place to another. That is mainly those items which are perishable like meat, butter, eggs, that can be sent for a longer distance. Late 19th century colonialism here, as we say that trade actually flourished and markets expanded in the late 19th century. That is, the trade was going on, and the whole society was going global. But it is not all goody goody. It has darker side also. That is, there are various parts of the world, they lost their freedom and livelihood just because they were having, say, vast land, they were having minerals, they lost the freedoms and livelihoods. Just see, this is the map of Africa, and here is the border. If you see this border, these are somewhat straight lines, like someone has used a scale and just made a line between two different big countries. These are the lines. See, these are straight lines like this. And was it done like that? Means drawn using a ruler or a scale? Actually, yes. When these powers, colonial powers or European powers, they came to Africa, they were fighting for the land. So finally, these all big European powers, they sat or met in Berlin in 1885, and they just, like a piece of cake, they carved out Africa, or you can say distributed Africa between them. For that, they just used this ruler line. Britain and France, they added to what they have. Now Belgium and Germany, see, Belgium and Germany, Belgium, this area is Belgian, this yellow area is British, and this is French, long, various. These areas are quite large. As far as France and Britain were concerned, they were having a large area. After that, you see, Belgium and Germany also came up. And then US came, United States. It took the colonies from Spain in 1890. So it also became a colonial power. So what this colonialism add to the destruction of economy and livelihood of colonized people? Let us have a look there. Rinderpest. Rinderpest. This is a disease. Rinderpest is a disease which kills the cattle or the livestock. Here is a picture of transport to the Transvaal gold mines. We'll talk about that in a short while. So in Africa, there was a disease in 1890s. This disease, Rinderpest or Rinderpest, it spread like fire. It spread like fire. So how did it came into this? The people, the colonial people, they were in the Africa, and the cattle, or you can say the germs or disease, it came from Asia. The livestock came from Asia, which was already diseased, and then it spread all over the Africa. The main point is the Africans, they didn't work. They were totally dependent on their livestock. That is, they were just the livelihood of these Africans were only on their livestock and the small cultivation they do. They don't do salary, they don't do any wage, they don't understand that also. Okay. Now Europeans, as I just said, that they came to Africa because of the vast land and minerals, and they wanted these people, that these African natives, to come and work for plantation and mines, because they wanted to produce crops and minerals for what? For export to the Europe. But they have a problem. The problem was the natives, they don't know the job, or they don't know means they don't want to work, because they have never learned that. They have livestock, and their life was quite easy. How do these Europeans then work for? Because the rescue came as rinderpest. Well, it's not intentional that rinderpest was as I'm saying that it has not been introduced by the Europeans, but it is just a blessing in disguise for them. This disease came, and almost 90% of the cattle, 90% of the livestock died all over Africa. All over Africa. So now the thing is, as I said, rinderpest, the devastating cattle disease, this came into their rescue. That means the colonial people rescue. That is now, as I said, 90% of the cattle died. So let me just add it here. 90% of the cattle died because of the rinderpest. And as I said, to feed Italian soldiers, this disease or this infected cattle came from Asia. And when the infected cattle entered the Africa, this disease spread all over. 90% were destroyed, cattle were destroyed, 10% was remaining. So these colonial people, they took control of this 10%. And now these Africans, they only know small cultivation and livestock or cattle, they only know about them. They eat them, they get their milk, etc. from them only. But when all the livestock has gone or cattle has gone, they have nothing to do. So now they are forced to work for the Europeans in mines and in plantation. So this is how the people started working. There is one more thing of indentured labor migration from India. So first let me tell you the brief here, then we'll go to the detail. What is the meaning of indentured labor? Indentured labor, it means bonded labor under contract. There is a contract between two parties, that is the labor and the agent, to work for an employer for a specific amount of time, normally 5 years. And this brought higher income for some and poverty for others. So what were the cause of migration? As we'll see here just now, all these we are going to discuss. So what are the causes of indentured workers? See, most of the indentured labor from India came from the present day region of eastern Uttar Pradesh, Bihar, central India and Tamil Nadu. So these regions of India experienced many social changes, like the cottage industry decline, land rents rose, and lands were cleared for mines and plantation. So in 19th century, indenture described as a new system of slavery. And there, if you see, there is a intermixing of the tradition. Jose, a carnival in Trinidad, that is for Muharram, when all the workers of all the races and religions, they join in celebration to celebrate it. So let us go into the detail now. So indentured labor, the labor taken from India and other countries to some other place for work, and they have a contract, that is, you have to work for this many years and you have to come back to your country. So in 19th century, hundreds of thousands of Indian and Chinese laborers, they went to work on plantation, in mines, to make road, railway. In other part of the world, there were different construction projects also, and they were probably they were having a proper contract, and they were probably misguided. That is, they are being told that you have a contract, you have to go into that country, work for 5 years, and then you have to come back. You may be able to come back. As I said, in India, these mostly workers were from Uttar Pradesh, Bihar, central India and dry district of Tamil Nadu. And the reason why they actually agreed or wanted to migrate or go to other place, because in the mid 19th century, cottage industry declined, the land rents rose, lands were cleared of mines and plantation. So they become more and more poorer. So in order, they were not able to pay their rents, and they were indebted. So that is why they were forced, or there is no other way just to migrate in search of work. So the main destination was the Caribbean islands, that is mainly Trinidad, Guyana and Suriname, Mauritius and Fiji. And the Tamil migrants, they went to their means closer places like Ceylon and Malaya. And the Assam indentured laborers were also sent to tea plantation gardens in Assam. Here is a picture of indentured laborers in cocoa plant in Trinidad. So as I said, recruitment was done by agent. They used to tell them that you will be, we will be giving you such an opportunity, you will be away from your poverty and oppression, and then they give them false information, that is, what is their final destination, what will be the mode of travel, nature of work, and living and working condition. But as they were also not told that you have to go on a long sea voyage. Sometimes some would even forcibly abduct these migrants who are less willing. So 19th century, this indentured labor was described as a new system of slavery. At that time, it was called as a new Nai Das Pratha, new system of slavery. When these people arrive at plantation, they find that whatever has been told to them by the agents is not the way it was being told. It is totally different. The conditions are harsh. They have just few legal rights. But still people stayed there. They blended with the cultural form, expression, and if you see Trinidad, the annual Muharram procession was transformed into a writer's carnival called Jose. Jose means Muharram for Imam Hussain Sahab, in which workers of all races and religions, they joined, which are mostly the indentured labor. And there is one more protest religion of Rastafarianism. This is made famous by Jamaican reggae star Bob Marley, and this also shows close link between Indian migrants to the Caribbean. There is one more chutney music which is very popular in Trinidad and Guyana, and this is very near to the Uttar Pradesh Bhojpuri music. You can hear that tune and that music there. So this is how they intermingled. And even if you see the players, the West Indian players like Shiv Narayan Chandrapal and Ram Naresh Sarwan and Bishu and Rampal, the fast bowler, they all have they are offsprings of the people who were sent as the indentured laborers. One more name I have to take. He is V.S. Naipaul. This V.S. Naipaul, sir, he has written in his novels about what was happening to this indentured labor at that time. That is the capture these because they were thought as being coolies. These indentured labor, they were not very at that time people were not very linked with them. That is, they have a different culture. Indentured laborers are just thought as a coolies. So Naipaul, he experienced that. He actually wrote it in the novels. These are the names I was telling you: Shiv Narayan Chandrapal and Ram Naresh Sarwan. These are people of Indian name. But how West Indies have them? Just because you can say their forefathers might have gone as indentured laborers. So here is a form of an indentured labor. This is every detail is being shown here. What about the Indian entrepreneurs abroad? See, Indians as a banker, Indian as an entrepreneur is always good from the ancient times to today's time. So Indian traders, they followed the European colonizers into Africa, and then also they went beyond the European companies, European colonies. They created, or they made the emporium, established the emporium at busy port worldwide, and they were selling the local and important curios to the tourists. This is how the entrepreneurs abroad also, because Indians were very easy for going outside and working. So this is how this happened for entrepreneurs abroad. When it comes to Indian trade, colonialism and the global system, fine cottons, India's fine cotton, as you know, that it was exported to Europe. But with industrialization, British cotton, it expanded. And those industrialists, they pressurized the government that you should not get this cotton from India or anywhere else. That is, restrict the cotton imports. That is, the Indian cotton export decline. Indian cotton export decline. Then from the early 19th century, the British manufacturers, they also began to seek overseas market for their cloth. And because now India has been excluded from the export, they also faced they also put the tariff barriers. So India faced stiff competition now in international market. That is the cotton. There was a sharp decline in the cotton textiles. If you see the export figures, from 30% around 1800 to 15% in 1885, and in 70 years, it just came to 3%. Then what happened? What happened to Indian export then? See, this is not what it seems like this. As these exports were declining, the export of raw materials was increasing. Please understand, when the exports of this cotton was declining, the raw material was increasing. The export of raw material was increasing. Between 1812 to 1871, the share of raw cotton export rose from 5% to 35%. So the raw material was going, and even the indigo was going. So here are some pictures of East India Company House. This came first to India as the traders, and then you know what happened. This is a distance view of Surat. You can say port. It was a very busy port that time. So as I was telling you, indigo, it was, in the export, it was having a major role, a major part. So as we also talked about the triangular trade, that is, the opium is the UK or Britishers, they take opium from India, they send it to China, and from China they get tea. So this was also happening. But over the 19th century, as we see, British manufacturers, they just flooded Indian market. Food grain, raw materials, exports from India to Britain and the rest of the world, it also increased. But the value of British exports to India was quite higher than the British imports from India. So Britain now had a trade surplus. That is, Britain had a trade surplus with India. That is, Britain was making quite a money from India, but in a trade we always see that Britain was trading with other countries also. So it might be that Britain might be losing somewhere, and the trade surplus which or the extra money or extra profit which Britain was gaining, it was settlement against those countries where it was losing. I hope you got the idea. So these are the, they were doing this extra money or home charges for some interest payments on India's external debt, pensions of Indian officials in British, like this. So this is the trade routes of India, showing that these important Indian ports, Surat, Goa, Masulipattnam, Madras or Chennai right now. So these are the trade routes that linked India to the world at the end of 17th century. If you see, this is the sea route in blue arrow, and this dotted red is the land, you can say the land route. The interwar economy. So let me tell you the summary of this, then we'll go into the details. The First World War was mainly fought in Europe, and during this period, the world experienced economic, political instability, and also the war, of course. So this First World War was fought between two parties. One were allies and the other was the opposite side, and these are called the Central Forces. These allies were Britain, France, Russia, and later joined by US. And they are up against Germany, Austria, Hungary, the Ottoman Empire, which has Turkey. So let me write Turkey. And this war lasted for 4 long years. So in this war, there were technological transformation. That is, first time the modern weapons like the machine gun, the tanks, the aircrafts, the chemical weapons, these were used in massive scale. And millions of soldiers had to be recruited from around the world, and most of them were men of working age. That is, fit men of working age. Then came the Bretton Woods Institution. We'll talk about that in a short while. So let us go into the detail. So the First World War, it was mainly fought in Europe, and the impact was felt all over the globe, And during this period, the world experienced, as I said, widespread economic, political instability, and this was a war. So it was a catastrophe. So what happened in war or wartime transformation? What changed in war? As I said, the First World War was fought between allies, two powers, allies, that is Britain, France, Russia, which was these allies were later joined by US, and then the Central Forces, the opposite side, Germany, Austria, Hungary, and Ottoman Turkey. When it started in August 1914, this First World War, everyone thought, many governments thought that it is going to be over by Christmas, but it lasted for 4 long years. So this was the war which was never seen before. Never, because powers were used, the destruction, everyone was enemy. Those people or those countries which were trading, they were trading friends, they became enemies. And this war was the first modern industrial war. You have to note this. This war was the first modern industrial war because machine guns were used, tanks, aircraft, chemical weapons, all were used in massive scale. To fight this war, that means they needed modern large-scale industry, because they wanted large ships, trains. Millions of soldiers have to be recruited, and they have to be sent or transported through ships and trains. And if you see, the cause of the scale of death was immense. 9 million, or you can say 90 lakhs. 90 lakh soldiers or people died. They died simply, right? You can say dead. And 20 million injured. You can say 2 crores injured. That was unthinkable. Because what was used? Industrial arms. If industry was not being there, this many casualty no one could think of. I will show you a picture. This is a picture of workers in a ammunition or a munition factory during the First World War. Now the men who were killed, the number I told you, were basically the working class, working age, because they were fit, they were able-bodied. And that is why the household incomes of the countries which were involved in the war declined. After that, see, when men would go to the battle, the women would have to step out and they took the job men would do, right? So this war, as I said, those parties which were trading, which have strong economic links, they were fighting, and they are fighting such that they just want to destroy each other. Britain, for this war, Britain has taken large sum of money from US banks as well as the United States public. So this US is now giving debt or loan to others now. This war has created or made US like that. Now, at the end of war, you can say the US and its citizens own more overseas assets than the foreign governments and citizens owned in the US. So now US has the power, or because of the war, the loan was taken from US and US people. Now US people have those people who have taken loan, they have to repay them. So that is how. Then the post-war recovery. War is always, it's for any party, any party who is involved, even the people who are innocent, it is dangerous. What happened after this prolonged war? The Britain was, because it was preoccupied with war, Britain was one of the party. India and Japan, these two countries, they developed themselves. And because Britain was having the, it has been capturing, or it has already captured the market. But after the war, this was not the case. Their dominance was difficult in the market now. Britain found it very difficult to compete with India and Japan internationally. And as I said, Britain took money from US. That is, Britain has burden of huge external debts which Britain and British people have taken for the war. Now, the war has one more side, that at that time, because everyone was fighting, so there was demand of this arms, ammunition, and so many things. So it increased the demand, production, and employment. But once the war ended, there were no requirement. The unemployment increased because production is not required. And at the same time, the government reduced bloated war expenditures to bring them into the line with peacetime revenues. And that is how there were huge losses. In 1921, in every 5 British workers, 1 in every 5, that is 1 out of 5, were jobless or out of work. So this was the post-war scenario. Everyone was anxious, uncertainty about their future. This only not happened in industries. In agriculture economies also, post-war, after the First World War, it happened. I'll take a case of wheat producers. Before the war, this Eastern Europe, it created a lot of wheat for the world market. It was actually the major supplier. But because of this war, wheat production in 3 countries, Canada, America, and Australia, it expanded. But once the war was over, what to be done? Production in Eastern Europe revived and created a glut in wheat output. That means wheat were produced in Canada, America, and Australia, and wheat was, after the war, wheat in enormous amount was also produced in Europe. So there was a surplus. Wheat was surplus. That is why when the things are surplus, the prices will come down, and the rural economies just declined or devastated, and farmers fell into deeper debts. Then the rise of mass production and consumption. In United States, nothing bad happened. They just quickly recovered. And we already saw how United States, United States actually they were benefited by the war. It boosted the US economy. So after some trouble, US economy revived. So it was strong again in 1920. So it was strong again in 1920s, right? So it just recovered itself post-war, because US also joined later in the war. Now we need to before we go for the or understand the Great Depression, the economic slowdown which happened in 1930s, we need to understand what was the precursor, what happened previous to that. Because as I said, US recovered, so there was mass production. The mass production began in late 19th century, but in 1920s it became a very characteristic feature of industrial production in United States. There was a person, well-known pioneer called Henry Ford. He just saw that in slaughterhouse they use conveyor belt. That is, the butchers use conveyor belt, and on the other side of the conveyor belt, the people could take the meat. In the Chicago slaughterhouse. So he said that this assembly line, I'll just show you what is there. So the meat are cut, and every point this person is doing some work. Then there is a conveyor belt. It is going to the other person. He is doing some work. Then this is going to another person, this conveyor belt, and finally it goes to the person who has come as a consumer. So everyone was busy in their work, and the production was quite high. Henry Ford took this idea. He took this assembly line, and because he tried it for producing the vehicles, he found it very faster and cheaper way. That is, the worker has to do same work again and again. That is, putting, say, nuts on the tire, or assembling the carburetor, like this, of the car. So the work was speeding up, and those who were working here, first they were happy that things are going well, but because they are not taking break, so of course a person is doing again and again repeated work, he needs some break. And because of this assembly line introduction, Henry Ford now can manufacture one car in 3 minutes. Can you assume? Can you just believe this? In 3-minute intervals, one car was coming at that time, 1920s. So this is a T model Ford, which is mass produced using this assembly line. So the first worker, couldn't cope with this. Then he increased their wages to $5 in January 1914, and then he also banned the trade unions. And this speeding up, worker have to work harder, and the Henry Ford has a different thought about this. He says it means worker will be suffering, but they are getting money also, and he said that this is the best cost cutting decision he has ever made. Now this idea of Ford, that is called the Fordist industrial practice, this spread in US, and there was mass production in 1920s, and this spread in Europe also. So because mass production was there, the cost and prices were also less for engineered goods. Now because of the people were getting higher salaries, they can afford all these fast made products. If you see, the car production in the United States rose from 2 million to 5 million in just gap of 10 years, from 1919 to 1929. And this happened not only for car, this happened for refrigerators, washing machines, radios, gramophone players, and all these were on higher purchase basis. That is, you just give the consumer has to give just some down payment, and then he can pay the rest amount in the form of monthly installments. So everyone has it now. So this is the prosperity. This is how US became prosperous. Every house has all these things, employment, income, rising consumption demand, more investment, and more employment and incomes. So in 1923, the United States, as you saw what happened here, the United States resumed exporting the capital to the rest of the world. And now US is the largest overseas money giver lender. US imports also and these capital export, it boosted not only US economy but European recovery and world trade and income growth in the next 6 years. So from 1923 to 1929, this was a very good time for United States also and Europe also. But this has to end. In 1929, there was a Great Depression world has never experienced before. So what is this Great Depression? How it happened? You need to understand this. How did this happen? So this started around 1929 and it lasted till 1936, 1937. You can say till mid 1930s. And because of this slowdown or economic slowdown or Great Depression, whole world, they saw catastrophic decline in the production, employment, income and trade. So this, agriculture regions, communities, they were worse affected. Why? I'm talking about agriculture, right? This is because the fall in agriculture prices was greater and more prolonged than the price of industrial goods. This is the reason. So now this is, I'm talking about the agriculture field, but let us understand why this depression happened. What is the cause of this Great Depression? So it is not one cause, there are several factors. First is this, that agriculture overproduction remained a problem. That everyone was creating or producing agriculture products. But if everyone is producing, the cost will go low. If the supply is too much, then the price will go low. And when the price will go low, the farmers will not get the money they want. So they will again produce the same thing. Means if they are producing something they are not getting money, they will produce more. And the price even got down further. And you see the farm produce rotted. It was wasted. This was the first cause. Have you understood this? Let us go to the second cause. In the mid-1920s, most of the countries financed their investment from where? From United States, right? So it is very easy for them to just go to US and take the loans. But US had a depression. So what to do? Everyone was linked to United States. So in the first half of 1928, if you see the overseas loan amounted over $1 billion. But just a year later, it was just quarter of that amount, 1/4 of that amount. So now those countries which were totally dependent on the United States, they faced acute crisis. If you see, people are in line, they are all unemployed. US also did same thing, means what they did, because they wanted the loan to be taken from the other countries and the loan they have given to the people of the United States. So they have to take it back. And the United States, it tried to protect the economy in the depression. How? They doubled the import duties, which the import coming from to their country, they just double the import duty, or you can say twice the import duty they have to pay for anyone coming to US for trade. So this also created a lot of trouble for those who were dependent on the export to US. And as I said, the industrial country, US was an industrial country, and this affected United States very much because the prices were falling and the depression was there. The US banks, which need to help, they actually started slash domestic lending, and whosoever they have given the loan, they wanted to get it back. Farms can't sell their harvest, household ruined, and business collapse. That is why those who have taken the money, how can they pay back, right? So the consumerist prosperity that we saw, that because of the production of refrigerator and cars, everyone was taking it, this just blown away. Everyone was unemployed, as I showed you the picture, right? After that, US banking also collapsed, and because it was collapsing, the bank got bankrupt. So those people who have the money in the bank, they couldn't go anywhere. As I said, let us talk in the number. By 1933, over 4,000 banks had been closed, and between this year 1929 to 1932, 110,000 companies have collapsed. After 1935, there was a modest recovery, but this Great Depression actually was great. It affected the society, politics, international relations, and also the people mind. So India and Great Depression, what happened to India at that time? See, the depression was everywhere, so India was also got affected, but not that much. Not that much. If you see that the tremors were felt in the 19th century, colonial India had become the exporter of agricultural goods and the import of manufactures, those things which are being manufactured. So this depression only affected the Indian trade. That is, Indian exports and imports nearly halved at that time. That is, it went down to 50%. The peasants, they suffered more than the urban one, because the urban people were getting they were salaried people, right? And those who have lended the land or some house, so they are getting money. But peasants, they suffered because the agriculture prices, they fell sharply, and the government refused to do anything for that. Peasants producing for the world market, they were worst hit, Indian peasants. Let us take an example of the jute producers of Bengal. Now these peasants, they grew jute that was processed in factories for export in the form of gunny bags. But because the gunny export collapsed, the price of raw jute crushed more than 60%. So peasants who had actually borrowed money from for this work, they got deeper into the debt. There is one more saying, the Bengal jute growers' lament was there: grow more jute, brother, with the hope of greater cash. Cost and debts of jute will make your hopes get dashed. When you have spent all your money and got the crop off the ground, traders sitting at home will pay only ₹5. Means just 5 rupees. So this happened, and as I said that India exported. It was exporting the precious material. This happened, notably the gold. There is a famous saying, or the idea of Maynard Keynes, John Maynard Keynes. He was a famous economist. He said that because of the gold exports, the global economic recovery, India helped in that. So this gold exporting actually helped the world as a whole, but not for the Indian peasants. So that is how because the rural India was not very good at that time, it was unrest. This is the time Mahatma Gandhi launched the civil disobedience movement, and this was at the height of depression in 1931. And as I said, the depression was less grim, or it less affected the urban people, urban India. The town dwelling landowners and the middle class salary employees, they had enough money and they were getting enough money. So that is how the thing didn't happen to them. After the war, that is, we call as post-war era, now it was the time to rebuild the world economy, to rebuild the world or those countries which were directly or indirectly affected by the menace or the catastrophe of this war. As we saw that First World War happened from 1914 to 1918, and just after 2 decades, just after 20 years, it was the time for the Second World War. And again, the parties here, the fighting parties were the Axis power. Axis power consists of Nazi Germany, Japan and Italy, and allies, that is Britain, France, Soviet Union and the US. And this went for 6 long years again. And this was not only on land. This war was fought not only over the land but sea, air, means all the 3 surfaces we know. Let me tell you again that this war which we are talking about, the Second World War, first party was the Axis power, and it consists of Nazi Germany. See, we need to call it as Nazi Germany, not Germany, because of the Nazi ideology and the person who floated this ideology, Adolf Hitler, because of this war took a different level. Then we have Japan and Italy. This is Axis power. Then we have Allies power. Allies, we have Britain. Then we have France, USSR at that time, Soviet Union we call at that time, now it is Russia, and then we have US. So this war brought immense destruction, a lot of deaths. If you see that at least 60 million, that is 3% of the world's population in 1939 were killed in this war, and of course millions were injured. And this war, or this casualty, was not only on those or in those who were fighting like this. This casualty, because aerial bombardment was there, artillery attacks were there. That is, all the people, whether they are fighting on the battleground or they are inside the city, everyone was affected. And if this is affected, economic devastation will also be there, and it happened. And there was social disruption, because people were leaving, people were getting killed, and there was no basic amenities at that time, because everything was on the verge, or you can say the war has taken away everything. So now reconstruction, after the war, the reconstruction was very difficult, and it was a long path to go. So there were 2 very important influences, you can say, because after the war took place, if you see the height, what was happening at that time in the war, these are German forces attacking Russia in July 1941, and here is the Stalingrad in Soviet Russia. It's just like a graveyard. If you see, it was totally devastated by the war. So there were 2 crucial influences. Again, understand, 2 crucial influences, because the post-war reconstruction has to be there. First is the United States. It emerged as the powerful country in terms of economy, in terms of political, and military power in the Western world. And then the second party was the dominance of Soviet Union, because it had made huge sacrifices to defeat the Nazi Germany. And while it was happening, the agriculture country, the backward agriculture country, which was known to people that it is a backward country, agriculture country, now it is the powerful country, because the world power during very years when the capitalist world was trapped in the Great Depression, they actually, or you can say the Soviet people, they came up, and now the true crucial influences is US, and I should call it as Soviet Union, okay, because it is Soviet Union, because Russia Russia is one of the part of the disintegrated Soviet Union or USSR. Now, post-war settlement, it became important, and we will talk about the Bretton Woods institutions. So let me just give you an idea of this, then we'll go into the detail. The Bretton Woods institution, to deal with external surpluses and deficits, a conference was held in July 1944 at Bretton Woods in New Hampshire, USA. International Monetary Fund (IMF) and World Bank were set up to finance post-war reconstruction. The post-war international economic system is known as Bretton Woods system. So this system was based on fixed exchange rates, and IMF and World Bank are referred to as Bretton Woods twins. US has an effective right of veto over key IMF and World Bank. So now, post-war settlement, because already the war has been fought, now there has to be some reconstruction, and then the time came. Everyone can see that the things are not well. That is, the market cannot say or cannot stabilize the full employment, because let me go to the detail. What was the economic experiences from this interwar economic experiences? What the people at that time, economists and political people, they draw the idea that this the industrial society based on mass production cannot be sustained without mass consumption. That is, if there is an industrial society and it is producing in a mass level, then there has to be consumption also in the mass level, right? But in order to consume that much, everyone should have a good salary, everyone should have a good income. But income, how can you be very sure about employment and income? The market cannot guarantee you the full employment. The market cannot guarantee you the full, every time, good salary, right? So for this, one thing or one institution has to come into picture, and that is the government. The government has to step up, has to step in if there are certain fluctuation in the price or output or the employment. That is, if economic stability we want to ensure, then there has to be government intervention. Government has to come in between. So this was the first lesson being learned, and second was that about the country's economic link with the outside world. The full employment, how can it be achieved? When the government had the power to control flow of goods, capital and labor. So let me summarize this. The first thing is that the economic stability can only be ensured when there is intervention of government. And second, it is related to the country's economic links. The full employment can only be guaranteed or can be achieved to a certain level if the government had power to control what? Flow of goods, and then capital, flow of goods, capital and labor, right? So these are the two things which came out. That is two things. First, economic stability and full employment. This was the key idea. And then with these framework or with these ideas, a framework was agreed upon. It was agreed upon at the United Nations Monetary and Financial Conference, which was held here in July 1944 at Bretton Woods in New Hampshire, USA. So this is a hotel at Bretton Woods in New Hampshire. This is Mount Washington Hotel at Bretton Woods. That is why this conference, or you can say this United Nations Monetary and Financial Conference, and finally what came was known as Bretton Woods. So this Bretton Woods established two institutions. IMF, that is International Monetary Fund, and this deals with what? It deals with external surplus and deficits of its member nation. So IMF, let me just go into the bank also, then I'll tell you. And then we have International Bank, and this is for reconstruction and development, and it is now popularly known as World Bank, and this was set up to finance post-war reconstruction. That is why these two, IMF and World Bank, are considered or referred to as Bretton Woods institution and also Bretton Woods twins. And this post-war international economic system is known as or described as Bretton Woods system. So in this Bretton Woods system, let me just take you to the detail. In this Bretton Woods system, or you can say Bretton Woods post-war meeting, there were two institutions established. One was IMF, International Monetary Fund, and this deals with the external surpluses and deficits of the, if any, the member nations are there, and there are certain deficits of member nations, right? Deficits of member nation. First is this one, IMF, and then we have World Bank. This is known as, or the name was International Bank for Reconstruction and Development, and this is World Bank, popularly known as World Bank, and this is set up for financing the post-war reconstruction. Post-war reconstruction, this is for that, and this all is known as Bretton Woods system, and they officially started working in 1947, and then most of the, all these were mostly controlled by the Western powers, or Western, you can say Western industrial power, and US has very effective role in this IMF also and West Bank also. Okay, so the international monetary system is what? It is a system which is linked with national currencies and monetary system. This Bretton Woods system was based on fixed exchange rate, that is national currency of Indian rupee. It is pegged with, or it is linked with, to the dollar at a fixed exchange rate. For example, I am talking about Bretton Woods system. $1, say it is equal to 50 rupees. I'm just giving an example, 50 rupees. Now this is fixed. It will never change. It is going to be always, today, tomorrow, one month after, it will always be 50 rupees. And this $1, it was fixed to be the cost of gold, 35, that is per ounce, 35 per ounce, right? Price of $35 per ounce. Ounce is a weight. Per ounce, like we have a gram and kilogram, like this. So gram, you can understand, ounce of gold. So 35 per ounce of gold, this was fixed as the rate of $1, and $1 is fixed to, like, lira, yen, say it is 10 yen. So this was fixed. And when the war happened, in the early post-war years, what happened? As we just saw, this Bretton Woods war system, it actually gave growth to trade and incomes for the Western nation, and also Japan. If you see this world trade, it grew annually at over 8% between 1950 and 1970. And it was mostly stable. The growth was, I'm just saying that because of this Bretton Woods, it actually worked for these countries. The unemployment rate also was less than 5% in these industrial countries. So this was good as far as these countries are concerned. And also the technology spread, and when the technology spread, the developing countries will not see, these were all almost developed countries which we are talking about, developed countries. What about the developing countries? So when this technology and all these things were going on, these developing countries, because they wanted to catch these developed countries, what they did, they invested a lot of money, capital, to import this industrial plant and equipment which has this modern technology, which was with developed countries. So these developing countries, they put a lot of money in getting this equipment which has modern technology. Then what happened? After that, there was decolonization and independence. Once the Second World War ended, then most of the countries were still under the colonial rule of Western powers. After, in the next 2 decades, 20 years, most of the countries were freed, or you can say they became the independent nation. And because of the independent nation, because the country, the colony, the Western country has already gone, now they have poverty, they are just you can say they are being squeezed out, they were poor and all the resources were depleted, and all the economies and societies were handicapped. Why? Because it was a long stretch of colonial rule on the people, on the country, and on the resources. But what will happen to these people who got, or these countries which got independence? They are like this, they are poor now. So IMF and World Bank, when it was established, it was made only concerning, the framework was charted only to contain the industrial countries, mainly the Western powers. For these countries which are independent now, like those countries which are poor and there is no development, what will happen to that? If you see, Europe and Japan, they actually made, they were, you can say, upward, they rebuilt their economies, and IMF and World Bank was not required for them, especially for Japan. And this 1950s, if you see, for this Bretton Woods institution was mainly inclining or getting towards those powerful or the developed countries. But when it comes to developing countries, then what happened? See, what will happen when they saw the problem, IMF and World Bank, they say, okay, we are going to do something. So these IMF and World Bank, they said, okay, we are going to do something. But the early colony, that is, if say India is there, India was the colony of Britain. Britain left it. We were poor, unemployment was there, and no development. So we have to go to these banks, IMF and World Bank, and these are doing what? They are owned by, or they have the major you can say partition of people of Britain only. So what is happening here is that India, being freed by colonial rule, now it is again going to the people, or going again to these institutions which are held by the colonial people only. So this was again an irony here, right? I hope you got the idea what I'm trying to say. That you have to go to your dushman, your enemy who left you. So this was very ironic. A large corporation of other powerful countries, the US, they actually managed to secure rights to exploit developing countries because they can get the natural resources very cheaply. So this happened. And when these countries like Britain, Spain, Portugal, they left the countries, but they left the country, but the main mineral and main resources were held by the companies of these colony rule. Like British company held resources under them in India, and if you say any other country, no doubt they became independent or they got freedom, but the resources and main power, etc., were held by the companies which belong to that those powerful countries which has left. So at the same time, what happened? Because these things were happening, developing countries were not getting anything. So they just experienced that, okay, we have to get together and we have to sit and we'll have to make a group. So these developing countries which were not getting anything or not very good, any output from IMF and World Bank, and they don't want to go also. So they just made G77, that is group of 77. This was NIEO, to demand a new international economic order. NIEO, new international economic order. These institution, or you can say an organization, G77, was made by the developing countries. That is, they wanted the control of their natural resources. As I said, the natural resources and minerals were still held by the Western powers in the countries which are already freed or already got freedom. So they want their natural resources to be there. They want more development assistance, and they want good and higher prices or fairer prices for the raw materials, and also for their manufactured goods. If they send it to the developed countries, they want good money. So that is why this G77 was being made. So then what happened? It was the end of Bretton Woods and the beginning of, you can say, the globalization, right? So what happened at this time? As we said, there was Great Depression, then an NIEO wall was found. So let me just summarize this one, NIEO. See, most developing countries did not benefit from the fast growth of Western economies in 1950s and the 60s. So they organized themselves as a group, the group of 77, that is G77, to demand a new international economic order, NIEO. So it was a system that would give them real control over their natural resources, more development assistance, fairer prices for raw materials, and better access for their manufactured goods in the developed countries' markets. Then it was the Bretton Woods ended, and what happened here, let us discuss. First, let me give you a brief idea, then I'll talk about it in detail. So there was new economic policy in China. Wages were very low in countries like China, India, Brazil, like this. So we'll talk about China first. The low cost structure of Chinese economy made its products quite cheaper. So China became a favorite destination for MNCs like multinational companies to invest. So new economic policy of China back into the fold of world economy. And MNCs, we'll just talk about that. Multinational corporations are large companies that operate in not one but several countries at the same time. So the worldwide spread of MNCs was a notable feature in the 1950s and 1960s as the US business expanded worldwide. So high import tariffs imposed by different governments forced MNCs to locate their manufacturing units. So let us go into the detail. So as we just said that the growth was there, but US after 1960s, US dollar, because it was being fixed, right? This US dollar is now no longer commanding the confidence of the world's principal currency, and the way it was linked with the gold, that is $35 for an ounce, it was also not being maintained. So finally it led to the collapse of the fixed exchange rate, and then it came the floating exchange rate. Let me tell you about this. Before going to the conclusion, let me show you what was happening. It was a fixed exchange rate, that is $1, say it was 50 rupees, always 50 rupees. But now the floating exchange rate means every day it will change depending upon the world economy. It can be 51 rupees today, it can be 52 tomorrow, it can be 50 the later day. So exchange rates, what were exchange rates? See, exchange rates, they link national currencies for purpose of international trade, and these are linked in fixed exchange rate and floating exchange rate. Fixed exchange rate means when exchange rates are fixed, as we just saw, and government intervenes to prevent movements in them. But flexible or floating exchange rate, as we see now, these rates fluctuate, that is, they change depending on the demand and supply of currencies in foreign exchange market, and there is no interference by the government. See, there are fixed exchange rates, that is Today also we have many countries which have fixed exchange rate, but even if it changed, the government intervened. But if your country has a flexible exchange rate, that means the government is not interfering, it is all going along with the international market. So what I was saying here was the countries, or now the people, certain things changed, right? The industries was hit by unemployment, mainly in mid 1970s and early 1990s. From the late 1970s, this multinational companies are those companies which have center or establishment in one or more countries, right? So the MNCs, they shift their production to the countries where they can employ people with lower wage. China, as we said, it was just cut off from the rest of the world, that is cut off from the post-World War world since 1949. But when after that, because in these eras, when actually the industrial world was hit with unemployment, China has this policy, the new economic policy in China, and Soviet Union was already collapsed, and this Soviet-style communism in Eastern Europe brought many countries back into the fold of world economy. So everyone wanted to come back, but because they have to, the Soviet Union was devastated, and China has very good policies now, and because of this, China, relatively with all other countries, if you compare, the wages were less. That is why the MNCs, multinational company, they went to, or they tried their luck to these countries like China. If you see, because of this only, TV, mobile phone, what you have in your hand, they have on the back, they say made in China. Why? Because of the low cost structure of Chinese economy. And why? Because of the low wages, the less wages they need to pay to the people, and it was very easy to work there also. So this is how the if you say the relocation of industry to these worlds, and these worlds or these countries are like India and China and Brazil, and that is how these countries also, their economic transformation was quite rapid after the introduction of these MNCs. They are going for the low wage work, or a facility to work in that country. So this happened. The Bretton Woods ended because the fixed exchange rate now became floating exchange rate, and this is the globalization of how the countries and the MNCs took their way into not only in those countries where they belong, but also to the countries which were low waged and they need to pay less for that.